When the conclave doors closed, few imagined his name would emerge. He was not seen as a front-runner, nor was he one who lobbied for favor. Yet the white smoke rose, and with it, a decision that surprised nearly everyone, including the man himself. Upon hearing the result, he did not smile. He lowered his head and whispered a prayer. What happens when the most powerful spiritual role on earth falls upon someone who never sought it? And can the burden of leading a global church truly be carried by one man alone? It cannot, and he knew that. From the moment his name was announced, he made no effort to conceal his sense of inadequacy. Not out of false humility, but clear-eyed awareness of what the role demands. He said nothing dramatic that first day, only that he would need help, prayers, collaboration, and the grace that doesn't come from hierarchy, but from God Himself. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. He addressed the College of Cardinals not as an executive assumes leadership, but as one among equals, aware that the call he received was larger than personality or preference. His voice trembled slightly when recalling the funeral of his predecessor. He spoke not of politics nor of agendas, but of grief and gratitude. That day, he said, was a Pascal moment. Death and hope braided into one. He acknowledged the vast weight of the office, but he was equally clear, no pope walks alone. He would not pretend to be the answer, nor did he posture as a reformer with all the solutions. He offered instead a hand extended to those around him. The Petrine ministry, he reminded them, was not a throne, but a cross, and it must be carried together. The audience was silent, not out of formality, but from the sense that something different had begun. There was no applause, just listening. A church worn by division and fatigue had not been given a performer. It had been given someone who stood in the space between expectation and obedience, asking quietly for unity, not control. And in that pause, many understood. The tone had shifted, not with slogans, but with sincerity. Leadership was no longer a voice from above, it was a plea from within. He stood beneath the same dome where so many had stood before him, yet his words made one thing clear. He was not assuming their shadows. "I am the successor of Peter," he said firmly, "not the imitator of other popes." It wasn't defiance, it was alignment. He would draw from tradition, not repeat it mechanically. We all face moments when the familiar no longer guides us, and we must find clarity beyond repetition. In those moments, deeper guidance can light the path. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and peace through his revelations. This ebook goes into his prophecies and offers insight into what lies ahead. It's available for free in the pinned comment. Grab it now before the edition's gone. He made no attempt to distance himself from his predecessor. On the contrary, he held the memory of Francis with warmth and reverence. But he resisted the temptation to anchor his mission in comparison. That posture was deliberate. He saw his role not as a continuation of personalities, but of apostolic responsibility. What mattered was not the image of a pope, but the vocation entrusted to Peter, a man called to walk with fragility and faith. Rather than building upon legacy as a brand, he returned to the foundations. He used the title Servus Servorum Dei, not as a formality, but as framework. He reminded those listening that authority in the church is not modeled after power, but after service. That the shepherd who stays behind the flock may keep his robes clean, but not his hands. It was this language that caught attention, not because it was new, but because it was rare in its clarity. There was no theological exhibition, no poetic flourish, only the simple articulation of a vision rooted in humility. He didn't speak as one seated on a throne. He spoke as one seated on a stone, listening for the voice of the fisherman who came before him. Observers noted how he refused to step into rhetorical grandeur. When he mentioned Peter, it wasn't with mythic language. It was with the weight of one who had been forgiven and sent. That same arc, mercy and mission, now shaped the way he understood his own task. He would not pretend to be more than a man, but he would not accept being less than a servant. Those gathered seemed to grasp the shift. This was not going to be a pontificate of personal branding. It would be marked by function, not flair, by obedience to a voice older than the conclave. And in that quiet resolve, many began to hear the fisherman's sandals returning to the shore. He spoke of silence not as absence, but as presence unspoken. God's voice, he said softly, is most often heard in what the world forgets to hear. It wasn't a line meant to be quoted. It was a conviction lived long before it was said aloud. And those listening realized this papacy would not shout. It would whisper. In a time when so much of the Church's discourse is shaped by urgency, commentary and debate, his words felt almost contradictory. He wasn't calling for new arguments, he was calling for interiority, for a church that doesn't just speak the truth but listens for it. He offered no dramatic diagnosis of the world, no warnings of doom. Instead, he invited a return to simplicity, to contemplative presence. If we lose the ability to dwell in silence, he warned, we lose the ability to receive the Spirit, to receive one another, to receive Christ, not only in word, but in stillness. For those seeking proper insight along the way, there's a free ebook available right now, but only while a few copies remain. He did not critique the noise of culture with disdain. He understood it. But he also understood what that noise masks, a longing for communion that can't be satisfied by content. And in that gap, he saw the Church's responsibility, not to fill the silence, but to protect it. This was not spiritual passivity. It was formation. It was liturgical. The sacred pauses between scripture readings, the breath before the Eucharistic prayer, these were not empty. They were invitations, and he urged the clergy and laity alike to remember. The most transforming encounters with God often begin without language. He cited no statistics, no trends, just a simple reference. The saints were rarely loud, and it was true. Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Benedict, Joseph, they mastered the art of listening before they ever became voices to others. He held them up not as mystics apart from the Church's mission, but as models of its essence. Silence for him was not retreat. It was depth, a place where theology breathes, where wounds surface, where mercy speaks in a tone no microphone can capture, and if this pontificate would be marked by anything, it would be that. A call to reclaim sacred quiet as the soil where faith takes root again. No banners hung above the crowd, no grand procession marked the transition. Yet the people came, thousands of them, not drawn by ceremony but by affection. They stood for hours under the sun and beneath grey skies, not because they were told to, but because something in them needed to say goodbye. It wasn't just the end of one pontificate, it was the visible proof that the Church lives through its people. They brought their own symbols, rosaries, photos, handwritten notes. Some wept quietly, others prayed aloud. It was not staged, it was instinctive, a shared response that emerged without command. And as he watched from the window before his election, he later confessed, "That's when I knew. The faith isn't inherited by decree, it walks in the steps of the people." He refused to interpret their presence as nostalgia. For him, it was mission. If this many still come, still wait, still kneel, then the Church has not lost its voice. It simply needs to remember who it's speaking to, not audiences, not media, but hearts. Wounded, tired, hopeful hearts. He called them not spectators, but collaborators in grace. He didn't see laity as passive recipients of doctrine, but as bearers of light in places the hierarchy cannot reach. And in this conviction, he found strength, not in the marble of cathedrals, but in the hands of grandparents teaching children to cross themselves, in young people kneeling on stone floors with cracked phones beside them, in families who share bread and prayer at the same table. He described the church as a womb, not a fortress, a place where souls are formed, not merely counted. He insisted that mission does not begin at the pulpit, but in the neighbour's kitchen, in the whispered comfort at a hospital bed, in the small yes to forgive. That morning, as the crowd swelled again for his first blessing, he didn't extend a message of strength. He extended a plea for mercy, not from above but among, and in that gesture he reminded them that the church does not belong to popes or cardinals. It belongs to the one who walks with his people in every place, especially the ones no spotlight ever reaches. Moments like these invite reflection. And if you're ready to take that next quiet step, you'll find a free ebook waiting in the first pinned comment. He opened the pages of Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, and Sacrosanctum Concilium not as museum pieces, but as roadmaps. These are not relics, he said. They are instructions, still unfolding. There was no apology in his tone, no hesitation to affirm what some would rather leave behind. The Second Vatican Council, for him, was not a phase. It was a foundation. He addressed the quiet resistance that had grown in corners of the church, the nostalgia that longed for a world before aggiornamento. Without naming groups or movements, he named the impulse, fear disguised as fidelity. To preserve is not to retreat, he cautioned, and to advance is not to abandon. He defended the council not out of loyalty to the past, but because he believed its call remained unfinished. The renewal of the liturgy, the embrace of dialogue, the empowerment of the laity, none of it had yet reached its depth. Reform is not an event, he said. It is an attitude. He rejected caricatures of Vatican II as rupture. For him it was return, return to sources, return to mission, return to Christ. He urged bishops and priests to reread its texts slowly, not for slogans, but for formation. He challenged seminaries to teach it not as a chapter in history, but as a living conversation. There was boldness in his defense, but never antagonism. He did not pit tradition against progress. He saw them as partners. Continuity for him was not about doing things identically, but doing them faithfully. The Church does not protect itself by freezing time. It protects itself by listening to the Spirit who moves through time. He acknowledged that mistakes had been made in implementation, that some had rushed ahead without roots and others had clung to comfort without discernment. But neither error could undo the truth. The council was a gift, and gifts, when buried, become burdens. But when opened, they become blessings. What he proposed was not a return to the 1960s. It was a deeper entrance into the soul of a church called to serve the modern world without losing its eternal voice. And in that invitation, he made clear, this papacy would walk forward, guided not by noise, but by the light first lit in a council still echoing. He revealed the choice of his name with a calm that disguised its weight. Leo, after the pontiff who, over a century ago, confronted the upheaval of a changing world with the encyclical Rerum Novarum. That document, he said, was not about power. It was about people, about labourers, about dignity, about justice. The name was not symbolic, it was strategic. The challenges had shifted since 1891, but their nature had not. Then it was the industrial age. Now it is the digital. And at the center still stands the human person, sometimes elevated, often exploited. He made it clear his concern would not be artificial intelligence itself, but the temptation to reduce the soul to data and the neighbor to a utility. Before continuing, it's worth noting there's a limited number of copies left of the free ebook we've made available. You'll find it just below. He acknowledged the marvels of innovation. He praised those who develop tools that heal, connect, educate. But he also warned that machines learn faster than consciences, and that progress without reflection becomes a mirror with no face, only function. He posed no dystopian vision. He offered no condemnation. What he proposed was vigilance, that the church would not wait passively while ethics played catch-up to invention. He urged theologians and scientists alike to sit at the same table, not to argue, but to anchor discovery in reverence. His eyes turned toward the young, not just those in parishes, but those who live most of their lives online, in realms where identity can be crafted and erased with a click. They are not lost, he said. They are searching. And if the church is not present where they search, it cannot expect to be found where they stumble. If these insights resonate with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your super thanks support helps us create more content like this. Join our community and stay connected. He returned to rerum novarum and to the dignity of work, not just in factories now, but in code, in platforms, in remote labor, invisible to the systems that profit from it. His concern was not nostalgia for old ways. It was the future's need for memory. And then, without hesitation, he quoted a prayer of Paul VI. Lord, I believe in your love, even when I feel nothing. It was a strange place to end, unless one understood that even amid algorithms and systems, faith begins not in answers, but in encounter.